Nearly 80 U.S. colleges and universities are under federal investigation. Why? Questions about how they handle complaints of sexual violence on campus. As college students start a new school year, what do these institutions need to do to protect their students? I'm Anand Naidoo in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. We'd like to start the show today by thanking one of our viewers who suggested we cover campus sexual assaults. It's an issue that's gained unprecedented political momentum in the U.S. and sparked a national conversation. California is the first U.S. state to pass a so-called Yes Means Yes bill. It changes the definition of sexual consent in the state's public universities. While critics are not sold on the new law, some advocates say this is the first step in combating sexual assault problems plaguing U.S. higher education campuses. Emma Salkowitz is heading back to school this year with a new accessory, her mattress. The senior at this New York City university says she will carry her dorm room mattress with her everywhere as a statement about sexual assault on campus.
I was raped in my own dorm bed. And since then, that space has become fraught for me. And I feel like I've carried the weight of what happened there with me everywhere. Since then.
Salkowitz filed a complaint against her alleged attacker to her university in April of 2013 after meeting two other women who claimed to be raped by the same man. After an investigation, the university says it found him not responsible. Her story is not unique among women on U.S. college campuses. According to the United States Centers for Disease Control, almost 1 in 5 women in the U.S. have been raped during her lifetime, and most of those women were first raped before the age of 25, and more than 40% of women will experience sexual violence other than rape. Additionally, the campus sexual assault study shows almost 14% of women undergraduate students experienced at least one case of sexual assault since entering college. However, the statistics are not without criticism. Some claim the numbers don't match reality and that this so-called crisis is blown out of proportion. Others question the reality of a rape culture or the legitimacy of the women's allegations, particularly when alcohol is involved. Social psychologist Carol Towers dedicated an entire speech at her conference earlier this year.
But these reports, which after all happen the next day, the next week, the next month, sometimes the next year, are contaminated by all the factors that can contaminate any other memory. If the participants were not attending to certain details at the time because they were inebriated or distracted, they would not have encoded those details into long-term memory. As Davis puts it, memory tends to be for the gist of what happened rather than the exact details. So the victim may report such gist characterizations as, "It was clear I didn't want to," whereas the accused guy may report his own summary as, "She obviously wanted it," or "She didn't do anything to tell me to stop."
As for the rapists, research shows the men who sexually attack women on campus are often repeat offenders. The average number of women they assault is 6. The U.S. government is responding to concerns about the number of women being assaulted on college campuses and their challenges in reporting. The U.S. Department of Education says nearly 80 colleges and universities across the country are currently being investigated for how they handle sexual violence and harassment complaints on their campuses. In response, many schools have ramped up efforts to fight sexual violence on campus. But for Emma Salkowitz, she'll carry her mattress as long as she attends school with her alleged rapist as a reminder of what she's been through and to seek justice.
I think the past year or so of my life has been really marked by telling people what happened in that most intimate, private space and bringing it out into the light.
Joining us now are two young women who are survivors of sexual assault on campus. Dana Bolger co-founded an organization called Know Your 9 to advocate for other survivors. And Faith Walker joins us from New York. Thanks to both of you for agreeing to share your stories with us and being with us. Dana, let me start with you. As we've been reporting, this is a widespread problem. This is a major problem on university campuses. The numbers we looked at are staggering. In your particular instance, when this happened, this was a crime, and given the nature of this crime, how did you go about reporting this?
So I was raped and stalked while a sophomore on campus, and I decided at the time not to report to police. I knew that my case wouldn't be taken seriously, and I knew that the process of reporting to the police would take years to go through to get to a trial. So instead I reported to a campus official. I needed help in real time. I needed help changing out of my dorm and getting extensions on papers.
What was the response of the officials?
When I reported to my campus dean, he encouraged me to go home, take time off from school, get a job at Starbucks, and come back to campus after my rapist had graduated. So essentially to put my education on hold until my rapist comfortably concluded his.
So it wasn't seen as a crime at all?
It certainly wasn't treated that way.
Okay, let's go to Faith in New York. Faith, you were sexually assaulted. What happened?
I was a freshman at my university back home, and I was dating a guy, and his brother had raped me in their dorm room while the guy who I was dating watched. And I didn't want to report it to campus police because I was really, really afraid. I was afraid to tell anyone. But one of the young ladies who lived across the hall from me saw that something was wrong. I told her what happened, and she made me go to the police. I shared every detail that happened that I could remember, and but I was too afraid to give the name of either the person who assaulted me or the brother that was with me. I just was too afraid to say anything. They did make me go get a rape kit done. I went to the campus health center. They had to open it up late for me because if I would have went to the hospital local to the city at that time, I would have had to pay for my own rape kit.
Right, Dana, is there a formal reporting process for this kind of crime, or is it just a general reporting process for anything that happens to someone on campus? I mean, you could have your computer stolen. Is it the same kind of reporting process? Is there something specific in this instance where we have a violent crime like this?
It depends on the campus, to be honest. At some campuses, the same committee that's hearing a plagiarism case is also hearing a rape case. But Title IX, a civil rights law, is what requires schools to handle this violence.
Okay, I just want to stop you there. Title IX is what?
Title IX is a 1972 law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education. And U.S. courts have interpreted, a rape to constitute sex discrimination. If you have been assaulted by the person that is in your English class, it becomes just that much harder to, write your paper, let alone, make it to class.
So how does that fit in with the kind of crime that you're talking about?
So rape is considered an act of violence based on one's gender. And so when we have 1 in 5 women in college in this country being assaulted on campus, we have a problem, but also a civil rights problem.
Right. Okay, let's go back to Faith. Faith, you were just telling us that you had to go through this. Nobody was charged. Nobody was held accountable for what they've done. I mean, what are your feelings right now after all this has happened? What do you think needs to be done right now to fix this?
What needs to happen right now is there needs to be a complete overhaul of the culture that we have when we look at cases like sexual assault. And instead of turning it into a he said, she said, there really needs to be more, they just need to do more as far as changing the culture. The universities need to be held responsible for that. And as a survivor, I should never feel shunned. It happened in 2002 when I was a freshman. It's now, 2014. It took me until 2011 to go back and even be able to say my assailants' names and tell the police who actually had done it. But by that time, it was kind of too late. The statute of limitations had not expired. However, it turned into a he said, she said, especially after so much time had passed. I still had the rape kit. There was DNA on the rape kit, but they didn't test it because, again, when they interviewed the assailants, they said one lawyered up and the other said that it was consensual.
Dana, when we look at something like Title IX, which we're talking about, are there built-in measures into that to protect survivors like yourself? I mean, is there something like disciplinary action that should be taken? Is there something that concerns survivors' rights in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems here is that survivors don't know that they have rights under Title IX. Most women in America associate Title IX with a law about women's athletics, not with a law protecting survivors of sexual violence. Schools are required to both act to prevent violence in the first place and respond after it happened. So that means, a school should make academic and housing accommodations for a survivor who, has been raped by someone living in her same dormitory, should provide counseling support to her. And on the flip side, should be taking disciplinary action against that perpetrator of violence. Most campus rapists are repeat offenders, raping an average of 6 women. And so the fact that so many of these campuses are letting these men stay on campus is really posing a threat not just to that individual victim, but to all the other women on campus.
Absolutely.
Right, go ahead, Faith.
Oh, I was just going to say, absolutely. I didn't know that Title IX covered something like this. I didn't know anything about my rights. I felt that nobody was in my corner. Dana touched briefly on counseling. I was advised that I was able to get a few counseling sessions, which I went to, but it really didn't, at that point, it really didn't help. Nobody was really there to tell me that I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't even tell my parents. I just told them in 2011 when I told everyone else. They had no idea. So if I would have known that I had these kind of rights, I think things would have been different. I absolutely think that things would have been different and they would have been held accountable for their actions. It's my hope by speaking out that more women who have been assaulted are able to get the courage that I have now that I didn't have then.
Right, so Dana, you have Title IX here, which is a 1972 law, as you've said. I mean, have there been any changes in the pipeline since then? I mean, have states or even the federal government introduced new laws or thinking of introducing new laws to combat this problem, which is obviously getting more and more serious every year?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there. Right, this law has been around for 42 years, and yet rape is still rampant on college campuses. Part of the problem is that the federal government has actually never once sanctioned a school for sexual assault-related violations of Title IX, ever, which I think sends a really clear message to schools that this type of institutional abuse of survivors will be tolerated. Luckily, a bipartisan coalition of senators and representatives just introduced a bill that will give more tools to the Department of Education to hold schools accountable, which I think we'll see having real tangible consequences in students' lives.
So what is this law that we're talking about now?
It hasn't been introduced yet. It was just introduced, I'm sorry, but it hasn't been passed yet. There is another law about to go into effect called the Campus Save Law. And that law is important because it expands some of these protections that we've seen for sexual assault survivors to survivors of dating violence and domestic violence and stalking.
I guess the great big difference here, though, of course, is that does this law strengthen the ability of the authorities to force campuses to report these crimes rather than just sweep them under the carpet?
The campus process and the criminal process are different. The police handle sexual assault because it's a crime. Universities handle it because it's a civil rights violation. They're not mutually exclusive, and survivors can report to either. What we're seeing, though, is that universities, when they receive reports from survivors, are treating this as a PR problem, as an issue to be swept under the rug so that they don't threaten their reputational brand. And so really the solution to that is accountability from the federal government, holding schools accountable for their violations of Title IX. And that's what this new bill will do.
All right, Faith, I want to get back to something that Dana mentioned earlier on, and that is the culture on campus, whereby you have young men who think that they can do this and get away with it, this culture of impunity, and this culture of basically treating women as if they're just sexual objects.
Oh, absolutely. Women have been objectified and sexualized. It's even more rampant now, especially with all the way the media presents it. And it's still got that sense of, well, what could you have done differently? What could I have done differently? And I don't feel I did anything wrong. And I know I didn't do anything wrong. And we need to get into a culture where we teach our young men that it is not okay to take advantage of women. Treat every woman that you come across as you would treat your mother, as you would treat your sister, as you would treat your daughter. Because I'm telling you, you would not want this to happen to your daughter. It's not okay. It's never been okay, and it's not okay now. And it has long-term effects. I've gone through counseling for many, many years. I've had diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from being raped in college because I didn't know how to handle it. And I think that, for me at least, it seems that the assailant has been able to move on, you know, has a career, has a family, and for me, it's like I don't know that that's necessarily fair. I mean, I know life's not fair, but it just seemed like the psychological damage that it did to me was far worse, and it seemed like he's okay with it. Like he did nothing wrong. As long as I didn't say anything, he did nothing wrong.
Ladies, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. Dana Bolger, Faith Walker in New York. Thanks to both of you. We are going to take a break right now. Up next, a researcher who interviews the men who perpetrate this violence and a woman who says campus sexual assault may be an exaggerated problem. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.